leaving a hurtful church situation and you're trying to figure out the steps to take to get back to healing. Well, if that's you, then this book review may be for you. So stick around as we review the Spiritual Abuse Recovery Workbook by David Henke. Hey guys, this is Nick with the Life Recreated channel. And on this channel, we dive into spiritual topics, but we also do book reviews just like this one. So if you'll find that helpful, make sure you subscribe and hit the like button at the end of this video. So on today's book review, we're going to be actually looking at the Spiritual Abuse Recovery Workbook. And we're going to be breaking this review down in 3 specific parts. The first part of our book review is going to be a brief summary and overview on what you can expect. The second part of this book review is going to be a quick evaluation and some key points on what you can get out of this book. And then the third part of this is going to be my rating on a 5-star scale of what I thought of this book. So first off, the brief summary. So the Spiritual Abuse Recovery Workbook is an interactive workbook that anyone can use and follow that may be leaving a spiritually abusive situation. And what's so key about this book is that it helps walk you through a hurtful church situation, especially one that involves spiritual abuse. This book is actually broken down into 2 specific parts. So the first part of this book is going to walk you through actually identifying what spiritual abuse looks like. And then it's going to walk you through the different stages that you can expect when actually in a spiritually abusive situation and actually leaving that spiritually abusive situation. And then taking you further on what you can do through the healing process of that experience. The second part of this book is going to actually give you personal testimonies of people that have left a spiritually abusive situation and what they experienced and actually how they were able to overcome that experience and find healing. Now, for me, this was extremely helpful because I actually went through a spiritually abusive situation, and at the time it was pretty difficult because it feels like nobody else can understand or kind of relate to what you're going through. So these personal testimonies were actually key in helping me in my own healing process. So in evaluating this book, there are 3 things that I particularly loved about how the author broke this book down. Number 1 is that the examples and the processes that the author used weren't directed towards any specific religious group, but rather they were based on the concept of spiritual abuse. And this can be extremely key because, if it was directed towards a specific group, there can be so many biases that we already have in our mind about specific groups. So being that it was just about the overall concept of spiritual abuse helped to just make sure that we focused on the actual spiritual abuse itself and actually the healing process and not the group that was causing it. And this helped me to separate what I was experiencing on an individual level apart from actually the group that I was experiencing it from. And so that was extremely helpful. So the second thing that I liked about this book is that the author broke down the specific stages of spiritual abuse and what you can expect from each stage. So those 5 stages that he talked about was number 1, recruitment. So what you can experience when you're actually being brought into a situation or a circumstance where you may be exposed to spiritual abuse. The second stage was dissonance. So dissonance is that moment in your conscience when you realize or you recognize that something is not right here, but you just don't know how to put your finger on it. But internally, you know that there's something just not right about the situation, and that you feel like there's a moment where you do need to leave and you do need to break away from it. The third stage he talked about was actual rebellion. And this is the part where, you realize, okay, I'm in a situation where I need to part ways and I need to go in a different direction. And that decision that you make internally causes a rebellion or a look of rebellion in that organization. The 4th stage he talked about was actually counting the cost. And this is key because, a lot of times we have to wonder and just figure out, okay, I put so much time, so much energy, so much effort, so much money, whatever the case may be, into the group that I was in. And now having to count the cost of whether or not to separate is a very hard decision to make. And then the fifth and last stage he talked about in the book was the actual exit. So when you actually decide to part ways from the church or the group that you're in, and actually just go out on your own and make that clear break. And so he walks you through all these different stages on what you can expect and what you can experience in all those different stages. And this was extremely helpful for me because it helped me to realize actually where I was at in specific moments or specific points in my own journey, and being able to identify those points helped me to realize, okay, I'm on the right path to finding that healing. The last thing and the third point that I'd say about this is that it was clear and concise. There was no confusion at all in how the author wrote this book. I mean, being able to point out specific different things and being able to just make it a very clear, a very concise book is something that the author did excellently. It's something that the author did tremendously well in this book. If you're looking for a resource that can help you to understand where you're at or what you're experiencing in your current situation, I would highly say that he did a great job at making sure that it was clear and concise. So before we go on to the next part, which is the rating of this book, if you're getting value from this book review and the content, make sure you hit that like button. And then do me a favor, if you've read this book before, drop a comment down below and let me know what you think about it. Or if you have other books or other resources that you think could be valuable, definitely let me know those as well. Okay, so for the last part of this book, the rating. I rate all my books on a 5-star scale. And so for this book, I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5 stars. And so the author did an excellent job, like I mentioned throughout this review, in describing in detail the different stages that a person would go through that has dealt with a hurtful church situation that involves spiritual abuse. And I know in my own experience, as I worked through my own healing process, one of the things that I desperately needed and I was desperately looking for and seeking was a resource that could help me to understand exactly what I was going through internally. And I think that anybody that has gone through a spiritually abusive situation or a situation that they were hurt by the church, there's so much internal confusion into wondering, why would God allow this to happen? Or, why am I experiencing or feeling the things that I'm, feeling? And this book, it helped to just give me so much clarity and understanding. And also it helped me to realize the experience that I experienced was actually real. A lot of times, we can look at a hurtful church situation and kind of think that, what we experienced wasn't real, or, it wasn't an actual, hurtful situation. But the reality of it is that as you go through this resource and as you walk through or work through this interactive workbook, you're going to understand that the things that you definitely experienced through your hurtful church situation were valid. And this book does an excellent job in helping you to walk through that healing. So one thing I did wish for, though, was maybe a deeper understanding of the psychological impact of spiritual abuse. I know the author definitely touched on a lot of the things that we can experience spiritually, and that's obviously, it makes a lot of sense, especially coming out of that situation. But I also think that there is a lot of psychological impact that these situations can have. And I would have liked to see a little bit more of just, how that may have impacted us mentally and how we can kind of overcome a lot of those different challenges. So that's, just my take on it. But overall, like I said, this is a 4 out of 5, excellent resource. Listen, if you're coming out of a hurtful church situation, you believe, there was some spiritual abuse involved in it, or maybe even if you're currently in that situation, I would highly recommend this book to just give you some clarity and just to give you some direction on working on your healing process. So that's the review that I have for this book on the Spiritual Abuse Recovery Workbook. I'm going to put a link down in the description below where you can actually get it on Amazon and pick it up. I'd highly recommend it if you're like I said, in that situation yourself, or if you know somebody else that may be currently going through that situation. And like I mentioned before, if you like this review, make sure you hit that like button for me and subscribe. Also, every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live show called the Life Recreated Show, where we kind of dive into this topic a lot deeper. And we do a question and answer as well to help, anybody that may be going through that situation. So until next time, this is Nick with the Life Recreated.